The morning sun cast long shadows across the rocky hillside as 10-year-old Maya Chen picked her way carefully through the scattered boulders. She had been exploring the caves near her family's research station for weeks now, always careful to stay within the safe zone her parents had marked with bright orange flags. The planet Kepler 442b was still being studied, and while the initial surveys showed no dangerous predators, her scientist parents weren't taking any chances. Maya paused at the entrance to a cave she hadn't explored yet. It was larger than the others, with smooth walls that suggested it wasn't formed naturally. Strange, crystalline formations jutted from the ceiling, casting rainbow patterns across the stone floor when the sunlight hit them just right. She pulled out her small flashlight and stepped inside, her footsteps echoing softly in the vast space. The cave was deeper than she expected. As she ventured further in, the walls began to show markings that definitely weren't natural. Symbols were carved into the stone, flowing and elegant in a way that reminded her of the Chinese characters her grandmother had taught her, but completely alien. Maya traced one with her finger, wondering what story these walls might tell. A low rumble made her freeze. It came from deeper in the cave, a sound that vibrated through the stone and into her bones. Maya's first instinct was to run, but something about the sound stopped her. It wasn't aggressive or threatening. If anything, it sounded sad, painful even. Against every safety rule her parents had drilled into her, Maya crept forward. The tunnel curved to the left, and as she rounded the bend, her flashlight beam fell across something that made her gasp and nearly drop the light. An enormous creature lay sprawled across the cave floor, and it was unlike anything in the xenobiology textbooks her parents had shown her. It was roughly the size of an earth elephant, but its body was sleek and serpentine, covered in scales that shimmered between deep blue and silver. 4 powerful legs ended in clawed feet, and from its back rose membranous wings that were folded against its sides like a bat's. Its neck was long and graceful, supporting a head that was distinctly draconic, complete with swept-back horns and intelligent eyes that were currently squeezed shut in pain. Maya's breath caught in her throat. A dragon. An actual living dragon on an alien world. The creature's breathing was labored, and she could see why. A massive thorn, easily as long as Maya's arm and twisted like a corkscrew, protruded from the side of its mouth. The area around the wound was swollen and discolored, and a thin trickle of luminescent blue fluid that might have been blood ran down its jaw. The dragon's eyes suddenly snapped open, fixing on Maya with a gaze that seemed to look right through her. She expected to see the mindless fury of a wild animal, but instead she found intelligence, awareness, and something that looked almost like hope. The creature tried to lift its head toward her, but the movement must have shifted the thorn because it let out a keening cry that broke Maya's heart. "Oh, you poor thing," Maya whispered, taking a step forward without thinking. The dragon's eyes widened, but it didn't try to move away. If anything, it seemed to relax slightly, as if her voice was somehow comforting. Maya's mind raced. She should go get her parents. Dr. Chen specialized in xenobiology, and her father was a veterinarian who had adapted his skills to study alien creatures. They would know what to do. But the research station was a 30-minute hike away, and the dragon was clearly in agony. What if it didn't have 30 minutes? She took another step closer, speaking in the same soft tone she used with injured animals back on Earth. "It's okay. I want to help you." The dragon's breathing seemed to slow slightly, and its tail, which had been lashing weakly against the cave floor, grew still. Maya knelt just outside of what she estimated was the creature's reach, studying the thorn. It was buried deep in the soft tissue of the dragon's mouth, and the wound had clearly become infected. The twisted shape of the thorn meant it couldn't simply be pulled straight out. It would need to be rotated carefully to avoid tearing more flesh. "I've helped Dad with injured animals before," Maya said, more to herself than to the dragon. "The principle should be the same, right?" The dragon made a soft sound, almost like a purr, and Maya chose to take that as encouragement. She slowly reached into her backpack and pulled out her small first aid kit. It was basic: bandages, antiseptic wipes, and a few simple tools. But it might be enough. The dragon watched her every movement with those intelligent eyes, and Maya had the strange feeling that it understood what she was planning. "This is going to hurt," Maya warned, moving closer. The dragon lowered its massive head to the ground, positioning the injured side of its mouth toward her. The gesture was so clearly intentional that Maya gasped. This wasn't just an intelligent creature. It was actively cooperating with her. Maya's hands shook as she reached toward the thorn. Up close, she could see that it wasn't actually plant matter at all, but some kind of crystalline formation with sharp edges that had carved a jagged wound. The dragon flinched as her fingers made contact, but it held perfectly still, trusting her in a way that made Maya's chest tight with emotion. Working as carefully as she could, Maya began to rotate the thorn, following its spiral shape. The dragon's breathing became rapid and shallow, but it never pulled away or tried to stop her. Blue luminescent fluid welled up around the wound, and Maya had to pause several times to wipe it away with her antiseptic cloths. After what felt like hours but was probably only minutes, Maya felt the thorn shift. It was coming free. With one final, careful twist, the crystalline spike slid out completely, clattering to the cave floor. The dragon's entire body shuddered with relief, and it let out a sound that was definitely a purr this time. "There," Maya said, pulling out a large bandage. "Now let me clean this up." She gently dabbed at the wound with antiseptic wipes, and the dragon held absolutely still for her ministrations. The cut was deep but clean now that the foreign object was removed, and it had already stopped bleeding. As Maya worked, she began to notice other things about the dragon. Its scales weren't just blue and silver. They had an iridescent quality that shifted colors as the light hit them from different angles. There were patterns in the scales, too, swirling designs that looked almost like the symbols carved into the cave walls. Most remarkably, there were bands of metal around its horns, and one front leg, clearly crafted rather than natural. "You're not just intelligent," Maya breathed. "You're part of a civilization." The dragon's eyes crinkled in what might have been amusement, and it made a soft, chittering sound. When Maya finished treating the wound, she sat back on her heels and really looked at the magnificent creature. It was watching her with an expression she could only describe as grateful, but there was something else in its gaze. Curiosity, maybe. Wonder. "I should probably go get my parents now," Maya said reluctantly. "They're scientists. They can help you properly." The dragon tilted its head, and Maya had the strangest feeling that it understood her words. To her amazement, the dragon began to make sounds that almost seemed like speech. They were musical and flowing, with tonal qualities that reminded Maya of whale songs or perhaps some kind of complex language. She couldn't understand the meaning, but the intent was clear. The dragon was trying to communicate with her. "I wish I could understand you," Maya said sadly. The dragon seemed to consider this, then did something that made Maya's eyes widen. It raised one clawed foot and began to scratch symbols in the dirt of the cave floor, the same flowing script that decorated the walls. Maya watched in fascination as the dragon drew what looked like a star map, complete with orbital patterns and what might have been distance measurements. Then it drew a smaller symbol and pointed at itself, followed by another symbol that it pointed at Maya. Are you telling me where you're from?" Maya asked. The dragon's eyes brightened, and it nodded, actually nodded in a way that was unmistakably affirmative. For the next hour, Maya and the dragon engaged in an incredible exchange. Using pictures scratched in the dirt and careful gestures, The dragon told her a story that left her breathless. It wasn't the only one of its kind, but part of a species that traveled between worlds, explorers and scholars, much like her own parents. It had been studying the crystal formations in this cave system when a rockfall had driven one of the crystalline spikes into its mouth. Unable to remove it alone, it had been trapped here for days, growing weaker from infection and pain. Maya shared her own story in return, drawing pictures of Earth and her family's research mission. The dragon listened with the same intense focus she had shown it, occasionally making encouraging sounds when she struggled to convey more complex ideas. As the afternoon wore on, Maya realized that something extraordinary was happening. She wasn't just helping an injured animal. She was making first contact between humanity and an alien intelligence. The weight of that realization should have been terrifying, but instead it filled her with excitement and wonder. The dragon seemed to sense her emotional state and made a sound that definitely qualified as laughter. It reached out with one massive claw and very gently touched Maya's hand. The gesture was so human-like, so filled with warmth and gratitude that Maya felt tears spring to her eyes. "Maya! Maya! Where are you?" Her mother's voice echoed from the cave entrance, and Maya realized with a start that she must have been gone much longer than she'd planned. The dragon's head snapped up, alert and suddenly wary. Maya could see tension flowing through its powerful frame as it prepared for fight or flight. "It's okay," Maya said quickly. "Those are my parents. They're good people. Scientists, like you." She touched the dragon's snout gently, and it relaxed slightly but remained alert. "I'm in here, Mom," Maya called back. "And I need you and Dad to come see something incredible." As her parents' footsteps approached, Maya looked into the dragon's intelligent eyes and smiled. "Get ready to make history," she whispered. The dragon tilted its head curiously, and Maya couldn't help but laugh. Somehow, she had the feeling that this was just the beginning of an adventure that would change everything her family thought they knew about the universe. The sound of her parents' voices grew closer, and Maya took a deep breath. In a few moments, everything would change. The dragon seemed to understand this too, drawing itself up into a more dignified posture despite its recent ordeal. Together, they waited to greet the future. Dr. Sarah Chen nearly dropped her geological scanner when she rounded the corner and saw her daughter sitting calmly beside what could only be described as a living myth. Her husband, Dr. James Chen, stopped so abruptly behind her that he bumped into her back, sending both of them stumbling forward a step. "Maya," Sarah said in the carefully controlled voice she used when trying not to panic. "Please step away from the creature very slowly." The dragon's head swiveled toward the new arrivals, and both parents tensed as those intelligent golden eyes studied them with obvious curiosity. Maya remained exactly where she was, one small hand resting on the dragon's snout in a gesture of casual intimacy that made her parents' hearts skip. "Mom, Dad, meet my new friend," Maya said with the kind of matter-of-fact tone she might use to introduce a new classmate. "I've been helping her with a medical problem." "Her?" James managed, his veterinary instincts automatically cataloging the creature's visible features, even as his parental instincts screamed at him to grab his daughter and run. "I'm pretty sure it's a her based on some anatomical features," Maya explained seriously. "The head shape is more refined than what you'd expect from a male of this species, and look at the way her horns curve. Plus, she's been very gentle and patient, which in most Earth species indicates—" "Maya," Sarah interrupted, "we need to discuss the fact that you're sitting next to a completely unknown alien predator as if it were a pet dog." The dragon made a sound that was unmistakably offended, and Maya giggled. "She's not a predator, Mom. She's an explorer like us. Look." Maya pointed to the symbols the dragon had drawn in the dirt. "She's been telling me about her species. They're space travelers and scientists." Both parents moved closer, their scientific curiosity beginning to override their parental fear. The markings in the dirt were clearly intentional, showing a level of abstract thinking that indicated true intelligence rather than simple animal cunning. These are astronomical charts, Sarah breathed, kneeling down to study the symbols more closely. This shows orbital mechanics, stellar distances. She looked up at the dragon with new respect. You drew these? The dragon nodded, a distinctly human gesture that made James blink in surprise. Then she began to scratch new symbols in the dirt. These ones clearly directed at the two adult humans. Sarah and James watched in fascination as a complex diagram emerged, showing what appeared to be a timeline of events. She's telling us what happened, Maya explained. She was studying the crystal formations in the cave when there was a rockfall. A crystal spike got lodged in her mouth, and she couldn't remove it herself. She's been stuck here for days. James's veterinary training kicked in. May I examine the wound? He asked, directing the question to both Maya and the dragon. The creature tilted her head consideringly, then looked at Maya as if seeking approval. It's okay, Maya said. This is my dad. He helps injured animals. The dragon lowered her head, exposing the side of her mouth where Maya had cleaned and bandaged the wound. James approached slowly, speaking in the same calm tone he used with frightened animals. Let's see what we're dealing with here. As he carefully examined the bandage work, James couldn't help but be impressed. Maya, this is excellent field medicine. You cleaned the wound thoroughly, and your bandaging technique is textbook perfect. He looked at his daughter with a mixture of pride and concern. Though we're going to have a serious talk about safety protocols later. The dragon watched James work with the same patient cooperation she had shown Maya. When he gently probed the edges of the wound, she winced but held still, clearly understanding that he was trying to help. The good news is that it's healing cleanly, James announced. No signs of serious infection, and the bleeding has stopped completely. Whoever treated this did an excellent job. He smiled at Maya, who beamed with pride. Sarah was studying the cave walls with growing excitement. The symbols here match the ones she's been drawing. This isn't just a cave, it's some kind of research facility or laboratory. She turned to the dragon. Is this your base of operations? The dragon made a series of musical sounds that Maya had learned to recognize as her version of speech, then began drawing again. This time, the symbols showed multiple dragon-like figures and what appeared to be different planetary surfaces. I think she's saying, this is a research outpost for her people, Maya translated, her young face serious with concentration. They study different worlds, collecting information about geology and life forms. Like xenobiologists, Sarah said wonderingly. They're xenobiologists studying us just like we're studying them. The implications of this hit all three humans simultaneously. This wasn't just first contact with an alien intelligence. It was contact with an alien scientist who might have been observing human activities on Kepler 442b for some time. James cleared his throat nervously. How many of your people are studying our research station? He asked the dragon directly. The dragon held up one clawed digit, then pointed to herself. She was alone. Maya looked troubled. Won't your people be looking for you? If you've been missing for days? The dragon's expression grew sad, and she drew a new symbol in the dirt, a circular pattern with lines radiating outward. Maya studied it for a moment, then gasped. She's saying they don't know where she is. She was exploring on her own when the accident happened. Sarah felt her heart clench with sympathy. The idea of being injured and alone on an alien world, unable to call for help, was terrifying to contemplate. Is there any way we can help you contact your people? The dragon's eyes lit up with hope, and she began drawing frantically. The new symbols showed what looked like a communication device, followed by a series of directional markers. "She has equipment somewhere that can send a signal to her people," Maya said, following the dragon's drawings with growing excitement. "But it's not here in the cave." The dragon scratched out a map showing the cave system and the surrounding landscape, then marked a spot several kilometers away where her ship was hidden. She had been making regular trips back and forth, studying the crystals and documenting their properties when the rockfall had trapped her. "Her ship is over there," Maya pointed toward the eastern hills. "She can call for help from there, but she was too injured to make the journey alone." James looked at his wife, seeing his own thoughts reflected in her eyes. This was the kind of decision that would define not just their family's future, but possibly humanity's relationship with an entire alien civilization. "We'll help you get to your ship," Sarah said firmly. "It's the right thing to do." The dragon's reaction was immediate and overwhelming. She reared back on her hind legs, spread her magnificent wings wide, and let out a sound that filled the entire cave, part roar, part song, and entirely joyful. When she settled back down, there were tears glistening in her golden eyes. Maya hugged the dragon's snout, and the massive creature very carefully nuzzled her back. "She's saying thank you," Maya said, though her parents could see that plainly enough. The next hour was spent in careful planning. The dragon, whom Maya had started calling Aurora because of the way her scales shifted colors in the light, was strong enough to walk, but would need frequent rest stops. The terrain between the cave and her ship was rough, with several steep climbs that would be challenging for an injured creature. Sarah and James gathered their equipment while Maya stayed with Aurora, continuing their remarkable pictographic conversation. By the time her parents returned, Maya had learned an incredible amount about Aurora's species and their civilization. "They're called the Zephyrians," Maya reported excitedly. "They've been space travelers for thousands of years, exploring and studying different worlds. Aurora is part of a scientific expedition that's been documenting life forms across this entire solar system." "Are there many of them in this system?" James asked, trying to keep his voice casual while his mind raced with the implications. Maya consulted with Aurora, who drew a small cluster of symbols. "About 30 ships total, but they're spread out across different planets. Aurora's team is just 3 individuals, and she's the only one assigned to our planet." Sarah felt relief wash over her. The idea of 30 alien ships was daunting, but manageable. More importantly, if the Zephyrians were truly scientists and explorers rather than conquerors, this could be the beginning of an incredible exchange of knowledge. Aurora seemed to sense their thoughts. She began drawing again, this time showing human and Zephyrian figures working together, sharing symbols and tools. The message was clear. She wanted cooperation, not conflict. "She's hoping we can be friends," Maya said softly. "Her people have met other intelligent species before, and they always try to learn from each other peacefully." As they prepared to leave the cave, Aurora did something unexpected. She approached the wall where the research symbols were carved and pressed her clawed hand against a specific section. There was a soft humming sound, and several of the crystal formations began to glow with a gentle blue light. "She's activating some kind of recording system," Sarah realized. "Documenting our first contact." Aurora nodded and made a series of sounds that Maya interpreted as explanation. "She's saying this is important history. The first peaceful meeting between humans and Zephyrians should be remembered." James shouldered his pack, loaded with water and medical supplies for the journey ahead. "Then let's make sure it's a meeting worth remembering." As they stepped out of the cave and into the afternoon sunlight, Aurora spread her wings and took a deep breath of the fresh air. The scales along her neck shimmered from blue to gold to silver, and for a moment she looked like a creature made of living starlight. Maya walked beside her, chattering excitedly about Earth and human culture, while Aurora listened with obvious fascination. Behind them, Sarah and James exchanged wondering looks. Their little girl had just become humanity's first interstellar diplomat, and she was handling the job with a grace and natural empathy that left her parents speechless with pride. The path ahead was uncertain, but as they began their trek toward Aurora's ship, all four of them, 3 humans and 1 dragon, carried with them the hope that this was the beginning of something beautiful, a friendship that would bridge the vast emptiness between the stars and prove that intelligence, compassion, and curiosity were truly universal languages. Aurora looked back at the cave one more time, then forward toward her ship and the reunion with her people that awaited. For the first time in days, her hearts were full of hope instead of pain, and it was all thanks to a brave little human girl who had seen past her fearsome appearance to the person beneath. The journey to Aurora's ship took nearly 6 hours, with frequent stops to rest and allow the injured Zephyrian to recover her strength. What should have been a grueling trek became an extraordinary mobile classroom as Aurora shared details about her civilization, while Maya, Sarah, and James asked countless questions. They learned that the Zephyrians had developed faster-than-light travel over 3 millennia ago and had since made contact with 47 different intelligent species across the galaxy. Each contact had been peaceful, following strict protocols designed to respect the autonomy and cultural development of newly encountered civilizations. "So, Earth isn't your first rodeo," James said during one rest stop, mopping sweat from his forehead as Aurora settled gracefully onto a flat boulder. Aurora made that chittering sound they had learned was her laughter, then drew symbols showing a vast network of connected worlds. Maya studied the drawings intently before translating. "She says humans are special because we're so young compared to most spacefaring species, but we've already spread to multiple star systems. Most species don't leave their home world until they've had space travel for at least 1,000 years. Sarah felt a flush of pride at what seemed to be a compliment to human adaptability and courage. What made her people decide to explore space in the first place? The answer came in the form of a detailed drawing that showed Zephyrian cities on a world with multiple moons, followed by images of those moons growing dark one by one. Aurora's explanation, filtered through Maya's increasingly sophisticated interpretation, painted a picture of environmental catastrophe that had forced the Zephyrians to develop space travel not for exploration, but for survival. Their homeworld's moons were destabilizing, Maya said quietly. The gravitational changes were causing massive climate shifts. They had to learn to live in space and find new worlds to settle, or their species would have gone extinct. The weight of that revelation settled over the human family. These weren't just explorers driven by curiosity. They were refugees who had turned their tragedy into an opportunity to help other species avoid similar fates. As they crested the final hill before Aurora's ship, all 3 humans stopped in their tracks. Nestled in a hidden valley below was a craft that defied every preconception they had about spacecraft design. Rather than the angular mechanical aesthetic of human ships, Aurora's vessel was organic in appearance, with flowing curves and a surface that seemed to shimmer like scales. It was approximately the size of a small research vessel, but it gave the impression of being grown rather than built. "It's beautiful," Sarah breathed, her engineer's mind already trying to puzzle out the propulsion systems and structural principles. Aurora purred with obvious pride and began the careful descent into the valley. As they approached the ship, Maya noticed something that made her pause. "Aurora, are those plants growing on your ship?" The Zephyrian nodded enthusiastically and launched into an explanation that had Maya's eyes growing wide. "She says it's not just a ship. It's a living ecosystem. The hull is made from genetically modified coral-like organisms that can survive in space. They provide radiation shielding, air recycling, and even food production. The ship is literally alive." James stared at the vessel with new appreciation. Biological engineering on a macro scale. They've essentially created a portable biosphere. As they reached the ship, Aurora approached what looked like a smooth section of the hull and placed her clawed hand against it. The surface rippled like water, and an opening appeared that was perfectly sized for Aurora's draconic form. She gestured for the humans to follow her inside. The interior of the ship was even more amazing than the exterior. Bioluminescent panels provided soft, warm lighting that felt more like being in an underwater grotto than a spacecraft. The floors were covered in something that felt like living moss, but was clearly designed to provide traction and cushioning. Walls curved smoothly into ceilings, with no sharp angles anywhere. "The whole ship adjusts to the needs of its occupants," Maya translated as Aurora showed them around. "The air mixture, temperature, humidity, even the lighting spectrum can be customized for different species." Aurora led them to what was clearly the communication center, a raised platform surrounded by crystalline formations that hummed with barely audible energy. She approached a particularly large crystal and placed both hands on its surface. Immediately, the chamber filled with musical sounds as the crystal began to glow. "She's calling her research partners," Maya said, watching Aurora's face intently. The dragon's expression had grown anxious, and Maya reached out to touch her arm reassuringly. "They're going to be so happy to hear from you." The musical tones continued for several minutes before being answered by a harmony of voices from the crystals. Aurora's relief was palpable as she began communicating rapidly in her native language, occasionally gesturing toward the human family. Sarah and James exchanged nervous glances. They were witnessing a conversation that would likely determine humanity's future relationship with an advanced alien civilization. The weight of that responsibility was enormous. After what felt like an eternity, Aurora turned away from the communication crystal with an expression that Maya had learned to recognize as excitement. She began drawing in the air with her claws, and holographic symbols appeared in the space above her hands. "Her partners are coming," Maya said, reading the symbols. "They'll be here in 2 of their time units. I think that's about 3 hours in human time." Aurora continued her explanation, and Maya's eyes grew bright with wonder. "They want to meet us officially. Aurora told them about how we helped her, and they want to establish formal contact between our species." The next 3 hours passed in a blur of preparation and anticipation. Aurora showed them her research data on human civilization, detailed observations of their activities on Kepler 442b, analysis of their technology and social structures, and what appeared to be a comprehensive linguistic database. "You've been studying us for months," Sarah realized, looking at the accumulated data with amazement and a touch of unease. Aurora's response, relayed through Maya, was both reassuring and impressive. "She says they always study new species extensively before making contact. They want to make sure they understand our culture and psychology well enough to avoid accidental offenses or misunderstandings." James found himself looking at the Zephyrian with new respect. "That's incredibly thoughtful. Most human first contact protocols assume we'll be the more advanced species doing the studying." When Aurora's partners finally arrived, the meeting was unlike anything the Chen family could have imagined. 2 other Zephyrians emerged from a smaller, sleeker vessel that landed beside Aurora's ship. One was larger than Aurora, with scales that shifted between deep purple and silver, while the other was smaller and more lightly built, with scales that seemed to contain the entire spectrum of the rainbow. Aurora greeted them with obvious joy, touching snouts and wrapping necks together in what was clearly an affectionate reunion. Then she turned and formally presented Maya to her companions, speaking at length in their musical language, while gesturing toward the young girl with unmistakable respect and gratitude. Maya stood straighter under their attention, suddenly feeling the weight of representing her entire species. But when the 2 new Zephyrians approached her, they moved slowly and carefully, clearly trying not to intimidate her with their size. The larger Zephyrian, whom Aurora introduced as Stellaris, touched one massive claw to his chest, and spoke a single word that sounded almost human. "Thank." Maya's face lit up with delight. "You learned our word." Stellaris nodded gravely. "Small word. Important meaning." The smaller Zephyrian, introduced as Prism, knelt down to Maya's eye level and began drawing symbols in the air. The holographic display showed images of Zephyrians and humans working together, sharing technology, exploring new worlds side by side, and teaching their young about each other's cultures. "They want to be partners," Maya breathed. "Real partners, sharing everything we know." What followed was the most important diplomatic meeting in human history, conducted largely through drawings, gestures, and Maya's remarkable ability to bridge the communication gap between species. The Zephyrians presented a proposal for gradual, careful contact between their civilizations. They would start small. Aurora would remain on Kepler 442b as an official liaison, working openly with the human research team. Other Zephyrian scientists would gradually introduce themselves to human settlements across the galaxy, always following protocols designed to minimize culture shock and ensure mutual respect. In exchange, they offered something beyond humanity's wildest dreams: access to a galactic community of intelligent species, advanced technologies that could solve Earth's environmental problems, and the opportunity to explore the cosmos as part of a peaceful alliance, rather than struggling alone. Sarah and James found themselves making decisions that would affect their entire species' future. But somehow it felt natural and right. These weren't conquerors or manipulators. They were fellow scientists and explorers who understood the value of cooperation and knowledge sharing. As the formal discussions continued, Maya and Aurora sat slightly apart, continuing their own conversation. Maya was teaching Aurora simple English words, while Aurora shared basic Zephyrian concepts that would help humans understand her culture. "What will happen now?" Maya asked, leaning against Aurora's warm side. Aurora drew symbols that Maya had learned represented time and change and growth. "We learn together," she said in carefully pronounced English. "Small steps, patience, friendship." Maya smiled at the way Aurora split the compound word, as if she was still figuring out how human language worked. "Friendship," she corrected gently. "And yes, I'd like that very much." As the sun set over Kepler 442b, casting the valley in shades of gold and purple, 4 species were represented in that hidden valley: human, Zephyrian, and the 2 biological components of Aurora's living ship, which Aurora had explained were also sentient in their own way. All of them working together, building the foundation for a future that none of them could fully imagine. Maya looked up at the stars beginning to appear in the darkening sky and realized that they no longer seemed empty and distant. Out there were friends and allies, fellow explorers and dreamers who valued the same things humans did: knowledge, growth, and the endless adventure of discovery. The little girl who had simply wanted to help an injured creature had become the bridge between worlds, proving that sometimes the most profound changes begin with the smallest acts of kindness. As Aurora settled beside her, purring contentedly, Maya knew that this was just the beginning of humanity's greatest adventure. Above them, the stars beckoned with the promise of infinite wonders waiting to be discovered, and for the first time in human history, humanity would not be exploring them alone.